Hello, everyone. My name is Liz Rosinski, and I'm the RIA's Grants Program Director. This recorded presentation is intended to aid in the submittal of your SCIIP construction contract review package, which is required after a bid opening and prior to contract execution. We hope this presentation answers any questions you may have about the process. Following these steps to submit a complete contract review package ensures a timely review of contracts so that SCIIP projects meet the critical June 1st, 2026 deadline. If you are ready to submit a post-bid contract bid package for review, it means you've accomplished a number of tasks related to SCIIP, including everything listed on this slide. It also means you've advertised the project, opened bids, and are now ready to submit the package to RIA for review. Why is this important? Because all contracts must be reviewed by RIA prior to execution of the Notice of Award, Contract Agreement, and Notice to Proceed. We will use this presentation to go over the checklist in detail, sharing reminders and also point out where mistakes are often made. Our goal is a timely review of the contract and its execution. Please note that while RIA does not provide a standard bid package or contract agreement for construction projects, grantees are encouraged to refer to the Engineers Joint Contract Documents Committee, or EJCDC. These documents are available from the American Society of Civil Engineers, the National Society of Professional Engineers, and the Associated General Contractors of America, or similar organizations. Another source is American Institute of Architects, or AIA. Using contract documents like EJCDC or AIA ensures most, if not all, requirements will be included in the bid package submission and will help expedite RIA's review process. Contract documents that greatly differ from the EJCDC AIA and are adopted only by a specific grantee often take longer to review and may be missing some of the standard information and language required for SCIIP projects. RIA provides a construction contract submission checklist that can be found online. This is meant to ensure all documentation required for RIA to review has been included in your digitally submitted post-bid contract package. If we receive a complete package, then the review timeline will be shorter. However, missing or incomplete submittals will stop the review process, which means the project itself is delayed. And as we've stated many times before, we are on a very tight deadline to get these projects underway, funds drawn, and projects closed by the middle of 2026. Sometimes it is forgotten that the submittal and the review of the post-bid package must take place within the timeline specified in the bid documents for the prices to be valid. We have always recommended a total of 90 days from the date of bid opening to allow enough time to complete your due diligence after bid opening, submit to RIA for review, respond to any potential questions or deficiencies identified by the review, and then execute the contract and issue a notice to proceed. If bids do expire during the review process, then we will require that you go back to the apparent low bid contractor and request a written 30 to 60-day extension of their bid pricing, which could cause delays. It is important that bid prices are held for an adequate amount of time initially so that the contract review process can move quickly. Of course, it goes without saying, make sure you have not executed any part of the contract, meaning no agreement, notice of award, or notice to proceed. Upon submission of a contract package for review, which should be around 30 days after the bid opening, RIA will review the package for completeness using the checklist as a guide and respond to the grantee with any requests for missing documents. Those missing documents must be submitted to RIA within 3 business days of the request. Once the package is complete, Generally, RIA will need at least 2 weeks from the time of complete submission to finalize its contract review. This review could result in a memo related again to questions or deficiencies, and the grantee must respond to this memo within 5 business days. Finally, when the complete contract package and any memo responses from the grantee have been reviewed, RIA will issue a letter which clears the grantee to execute the construction contract. It is important to factor in these submission and review timelines when establishing your desired contract execution and construction deadlines. Obviously, any extended time needed to ensure completeness of the contract submission or for RIA to issue a review memo and review those responses from the grantee will lengthen the overall review process. It is also important to keep in mind that once we get to the target date between July and October, that is when we expect to hit peak volume of SCIIP contract submittals. So during this time, your cooperation and timely submissions will be even more critical to ensure RIA's review process is as responsive and efficient as possible. Before we get into the weeds on the checklist, this is a good time to highlight a few circumstances that could occur with a bid opening and how they are handled by RIA and the SCIIP grant program. So at this point, the project's been advertised for 30 days in SCIIP. Qualified contractors were directly solicited. Now it's time for your bid opening. What if you only receive one bid? This is where it becomes critically important that qualified contractors were directly solicited during advertisement and the project was posted in SCIIP. If the grantee can show that a good faith effort was made through direct solicitation and the single bid is within budget or the overage can be covered using local funds, then after RIA's review, the contract could still be awarded to the sole bidder without rebidding the project. In this instance, it will also be very important to ensure that the required statement of cost reasonableness is also included with an engineer's recommendation to award letter. Another scenario, the bid opening date arrives and no bids have been received for the project. If this occurs, please notify your grant manager immediately. The project will have to be rebid, but try to consider what could be done to increase the likelihood of a successful rebid. Could the project be split into divisions in an effort to make it more appealing to contractors? How many plan holders were there? Was there any feedback from the plan holders during advertisement that could be taken into consideration to increase the chance of a successful bid opening? Is the contract time of completion reasonable for the work included in the project? The next question is, did the low bid come in over budget? Given the current environment, bids may come in higher than anticipated. This is why we strongly encourage the use of alternates on your bid form. Including alternates provides the flexibility needed to get an over-budget project back within the margins rather than having to rebid. However, add or deduct alternates should be clearly defined in the evaluation of bids section. Notify your grant manager immediately and before taking any action if bids exceed the cost estimate. And of course, committing local funds is also an option. Let me touch on negotiations and value engineering of bids for SCIIP grant-funded projects. When all bids come in over budget, the grantee is very limited in the way they can approach price negotiations. Negotiations must take place with all bidders by requesting a revised bid form from each and every one who submitted a bid. All bidders must be treated equally during the process. Value engineering can be used during negotiations to complete the same project for less price. Value engineering should involve consideration of the use of alternative equal materials or products and procedures to eliminate construction steps which achieve the same outcome. Value engineering should not change the scope of the project unless the changes are minor or for incidental items such as fencing or driveways. Finally, a rebid will likely be required when a bid comes in over budget and the grantee does not have the required local funds needed to cover the overage. If this occurs again, call us and we can discuss and help you find the best way forward. Okay, on to the checklist. Here's a close-up look of all of the items listed on the submission checklist form that must be sent to RIA. The first tip, submit all the applicable documents listed on the checklist at one time rather than sending piecemeal documentation as individual items become available. It's important to point out again that RIA will not begin its review of the post-bid package until all required documentation have been submitted. We will review the submitted package for completeness and respond to the grantee to request any missing contract documents. Once requested, the grantee must submit the missing documentation within 3 business days. If a response is not received within the established timeline, RIA will stop further review and notify the grantee that the bid package must be resubmitted once it is complete. Please also name and number your electronic files to match our checklist. This allows us to easily identify the various components within the checklist, allowing for a faster processing of the documents, which leads to an overall faster review turnaround time. If your server does not allow a single email with all attachments to be included, you may break it up, but please indicate 1 of 3, 2 of 3, etc. when emailing separately. Another option is to send us a link to download the required files from your server. So let's go into details with each of these numbers on the checklist to learn best practices as well as common mistakes we encounter. For SCIIP, you must submit 2 pieces of documentation related to advertisement, both the actual ad as it appeared in SCIIP and, equally as important, documentation showing direct solicitation. This could be as easy as a copy of the email sent to all possible contractors or certification that X number of contractors were sent an email on a specified day, month, and year. This proof of direct solicitation is required because it demonstrates the grantee's efforts to ensure a fair and competitive bid process. Now, all the components listed on this slide should be included with your bid package submittal. Now, as part of the contract review, I should point out that RIA staff compare the bid form, specifically the line items and their quantities, to the detailed cost estimate in the SCIIP application. If there are significant differences, we'll require the engineer to explain the variances in writing. You can preempt that by including the explanation with your submission. Of course, the lowest responsive and responsible bidder should be selected for award. In fact, this language should be included in the evaluation of bids or method to award section. And so since we continue to strongly recommend the use of alternates for keeping the project within budget, it is critical that the procedures outlined in the instructions or information to bidders provide a clear description as to how alternatives will be handled and exactly what will be used to determine the low bid. Is it the base bid only, or is it the base plus any selected alternates within the budget allocated? In other words, the bid instructions should clearly reflect how the low bid will be determined when there are alternates or division bids included. It happens with some frequency that an addendum is issued, but we do not receive a copy, so make sure all addenda are submitted for our review. And we have required that the federal terms and conditions must be included in the contract documents. Unfortunately, we are still seeing bid packages submitted where this information was not included. It is our strongest recommendation that you identify those terms and conditions in your table of contents and include the contents somewhere in the bid package. What is not acceptable, the inclusion of the entire SCIIP project management procedures or simply providing a link to our website. We think that these methods can lead to confusion. In other words, the actual text from Section 4, Part M which starts on page 42 of the SCIIP project management procedures, must be included in your bid package and easily indexed. A bid tab must be submitted for review, and it should contain a detailed summary of all bids and bid items. The bid tab itself does not have to be signed as long as the project engineer certifies and recommends award to the lowest qualified and responsive bidder in their recommendation to award letter. When the bids are tabulated, any errors should be handled as indicated in the bid package instructions. Any corrections should be clearly indicated on the certified bid tab. In addition, those errors should be acknowledged and addressed in the recommendation to award letter from the engineer. That same recommendation letter should also indicate that a cost price analysis was performed, no matter if design bid build, or a CMAR project. Essentially, we are asking the grantee through their engineer to address the cost reasonableness of the apparent low bid. This is a federal requirement, and this analysis and language is often overlooked. If there's any deviation from awarding to the lowest bidder, or if any bids are rejected, that should be well documented and explained in the engineer's letter. Finally, the letter should identify the contract award amount and any accepted alternates. Please also provide a copy of the winning bidder's response, which should include the completed bid form. A bid bond should also be provided in addition to documentation of hazard insurance if it was provided. And while we are discussing the bid form, please consider the following. While we had required a contingency on the SCIIP application, it is important to note that this contingency should not be carried over to the bid form. Also, local funds may be required to cover allowances that are listed or identified on the bid form. Additionally, we have seen some use language such as extra work if ordered by engineer. This should not be used in determination of the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Essentially, we view this as a contingency, and therefore the extra work must be properly implemented via change order and paid for using local funds. Grantees must obtain certification regarding debarment from the contractor by completing the form on this slide. This form is both online and in the SCIIP project management procedures. This process should be completed by the grantee after bid opening and prior to submitting the post-bid package to RIA for review, and it should be signed by the chief executive official. So for this checklist item number 6, we do include some common errors or omissions which we see during our review. We do want to see the agreement unexecuted, but completely filled in with all pertinent information as it relates to the apparent low bidder. This includes but is not limited to the contractor's name, a clearly listed contract price, and a reasonable time of performance. Please also ensure that the agreement contains an accurate description of the work to be carried out in accordance with the low bid and any additive or deductive alternate selected. Also, if you are using EJ/CDC or AIA contract docs, there is standard language in the agreement which states that past due payments to the contractor will bear interest. Because interest payments cannot be made using SCIIP grant funds, this is a common item that requires a memo response from RIA. We recommend either removing this language altogether or revising this section of the agreement to make it clear that those interest funds will not be paid using SCIIP funds. Lastly, although not found in the agreement, but rather in the standard general conditions of EJ/CDC or AIA, there is a section which addresses a 10-day processing of request for payment from the contractor. This is another item which requires revision, as it can take 30 days to process a payment request. We recommend either revising this section to a 30-day processing time or changing the language to read that a payment will become due 10 days after the pay application has been processed by the grantee/owner and the funding agency, which in this case is RIA. Grantees must certify that any needed permanent easement, rights of ways, or property acquisition have been completed. This can be done by a letter from the Chief Executive Official. Either submit all of your construction permits with a package or provide a list of all permits required for the project and certify that they have been obtained. If needed, a commitment of additional non-SCIIP or non-RA funds should be submitted if costs come in higher than anticipated. Please ensure that funding commitment letters are also signed by the Chief Executive Official. These must be submitted as a hard copy with an original wet, also known as pen and ink signature. But for review purposes, we can accept a scanned copy of the signed funding commitment letter, but the hard copy must be mailed to us. The bottom of the submission checklist asks grantees to estimate the expected date for issuance of the notice to proceed. Generally, we expect the project to get underway within 60 days of contract award, so the bid documents should indicate how soon the project will begin. Keep in mind that the number of days, construction days included in the contract to complete the project should be in advance of the June 2026 deadline to allow enough time for monitoring and closeout of the grant. Let's talk about the System for Award Management, or SAM. As I mentioned earlier, debarment language is included in the project management procedures, so verification with SAM is a requirement for all projects receiving SCIIP funds. This means that SCIIP funds may not go to entities prohibited from doing business with the federal government. So be sure to look the proposed contractor up on SAM.gov. All contractors should have active SAM registration at the time of contract execution, and that registration should remain active throughout the duration of the construction contract period. Please note it is the responsibility of the grantee and prime contractor to ensure all subcontractors are also active in SAM and not debarred. Grantees are required to submit the active registration documentation to RIA as demonstrated on the slide with their post-bid construction package. Another common misstep that we have seen is when the SCIIP project sign has been added to the bid form in order for it to be an eligible grant expense, but the corresponding technical specs were not included in the bid package. Those must be incorporated. The specifications can be downloaded from our website on the SCIIP implementation page at the address provided on the slide. Remember, a SCIIP sign is not required, but if you do include it on the bid form, the specs must be part of the bid package. One last important thing concerning contracts I'd like to mention. For SCIIP contracts reviewed by RIA, the notice to proceed, as well as the contract agreement, must be submitted to RIA once they have been fully executed. These must be received prior to the first draw request. So please provide these fully executed documents electronically and as soon as possible. So the key takeaways from this recording. We strongly recommend the use of EJCDC or AIA standard contract documents. Submit your bid package within 30 days of the bid opening to allow RIA enough time to review and respond while bids are valid. Be sure to review and include all applicable items listed on the construction contract submission checklist and sending them in all at once. It is helpful too if you name the electronic files to correspond to the checklist. Once you have all the items, then it is time to submit via email to your assigned grant manager. If there's any request for more information or clarification, please respond as quickly as possible. Remember to take into consideration the amount of time needed for RIA review. Generally, it takes 2 weeks for review if everything is in order and correctly submitted. However, keep in mind that there may be higher contract volumes than normal, So to speed up the process, please submit the complete bid package and explain any discrepancies. Our goal is to get these projects under construction as soon as possible. And to do that requires that we work together. You do your part and we will work quickly to do ours. This concludes our presentation on construction contract submittals for SCIIP. Obviously, if you have any specific questions, we encourage you to contact your assigned grant manager, and you can use the link provided on the slide to see the detailed listing by assigned area. We thank you for your time.